بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. First a dua to one of our sisters, very active mashallah in the masjid and going through serious health issues. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يشفيها شفاء لا يغادر سقما. اللهم اشفيها شفاء لا يغادر سقما يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارفع عنها من الخبث في البدن يا أرحم الراحمين، وارفع عنها الغم يا كريم يا رحمن يا رحيم. اللهم وطهرها من هذا المرض، اللهم طهرها من هذا المرض، اللهم اذهب عنها الباس واشفها شفاء لا يغادر سقما يا شافي يا كريم يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم آمين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that the shaitan, la'anahu Allah, has, let's say, we don't say power, but has a power on those who, are weak and those who take him as a wali, as an ally. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us, قال إن عبادي ليس لك عليهم سلطان. My servant, you don't have any authority on them. And this is, subhanAllah, very profound, because you, as a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're supposed to guarantee yourself from the cunning of the shaitan, from the plot of the shaitan, from the delusion of the shaitan, because you are in the fortress of the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the other ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال إن عبادي قال إلا عبادك منهم المخلصين. I will go to divert them, I will go to mislead them, except your servant of yours المخلصين. And in the other قراءة قال المخلصين. قال هذا صراط علي مستقيم. This is a path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it to be. So the shaitan does not have any authority, does not have any power on the true servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, in our journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, should we not be from these servants that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guarantee for us, for this servant to be protected, and the shaitan will not have any authority. Actually, when they are in this category, he will not even get close to them. When they were talking about the shayateen, and everyone has his shaitan, qari, the Prophet ﷺ, when Umar said, what about me, Ya Rasulullah? He told them, your shaitan, when he see you from the other side, he will run away the other side. When you see it coming, he will run away from the other side. Which is means, subhanAllah, Umar radiallahu ta'ala get to that category of the servitude where the shaitan is not even able to approach them. And then, how to be mukhlas and mukhlas. Mukhlas is the one that he's been cleansed and selected and chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wal mukhlisu, he's the one who has cleansed their deeds and they are acting in sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the two are connected, because we will not be able to be mukhlasin unless we get to be mukhlisin. So we will not be able to be selected and chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala till we'll make these steps to be mukhlisina lillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the Arifin, they used to say, قال إنما بطاعة الله تنال كرم الله. It's with the obedience of Allah, the servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you will be able to get the honoring from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, the believers today, when you think, you said, can me, myself, be from those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala select them to be the chosen one? You already been chosen one. I mean, being a believer, you are chosen one. Look how many, subhanAllah, out there, they don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they don't even know Allah. Some of them, they neglect the existence of Allah. Some of them, they deny His existence. And you, among those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them to know Him, you are in a masjid praying to Him in this night, blessed night of Ramadan. So you are already chosen one. So the next step for you, to be from al-mukhlas, to be al-mukhlas, so you'll be in the protection and the fortress of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The shaitan will not be able to get close to you at all. Now, the thing is, when to be mukhlas, not for the sake to be protected by from the shaitan, because that's comes, subhanAllah, part of your action, part of your closeness to Allah. Let's say part of the package of the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the most important, how can you get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be at this level, honored of these categories of the ibad? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He had the realm of the right as-salihin. قال يا أيها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي. Enter within the sphere of my servant. So you want to be from that sphere of those servants, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He said ibadun mukhlasin wa ibadun mukhlisin, that all of us, we wish and we are working and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be among them. What is the core worship of the heart to help us access this level? The core worship of the heart is the humility, is al-inkisar. And the thing is, we do worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we do not measure our humility to Allah. How much you feel dependent in Allah, how much you feel poor to Allah, how much you feel in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might test you sometimes with some sickness, and you'll see how weak you are, and you feel how, subhanallah, need you have to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, begging Him every day to give you shifa. Sometimes someone has, subhanallah, his back is dislocated, he cannot even move, he cannot even make sujood. He will be begging Allah to give him that opportunity back to make sujood. And when we are in a good situation and ease, we forget such a thing. When we are in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in every step you do, in every breath you take, you are in need to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's how we venerate, how to start, be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, look, the humility to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase the quality of the worship. And the increase of the quality of the worship increase your reverence to Allah. And the reverence to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His glorification is going to increase your love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're going to love Allah more, because the more you know the greatness of Allah, the more you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you come to this place, to this level, you feel liberated from the whole gravity of the earth. Everything that pulling you down, all the dreams of the worldly life, you feel liberated from it. Even though you're going to continue achieving whatever achieving for the purpose of your livelihood, but that's not your purpose. That's not your dream. That's not your dream. And when you come to that point, then you'll be elevated to the level of the true ubudiyyah of al-mukhlas, then to be selected al-mukhlas. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He called those who will be cleansed them, قَالَ يُحِبُّهُمْ وَيُحِبُّونَ. So imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala start with loving you, and you love Him back. And the love in you is that Allah make easy for you the path to come to Him. Therefore, in Ramadan, this is the season of getting near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is achieved with two path of perspective. Knowing, subhanAllah, that the heart that you have have that innate need to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember, inherently, the heart is by essence, is in need of Allah. Look, people, subhanAllah, they try every type of pleasure. But every pleasure they try, it takes like small moment, they give them small short moment of ecstasy, and it dies. And then they go back, they want to get it back, and it dies. That is actually the addiction. Why people they get into addiction, drug addiction and substance addiction? Because they feel such a pleasure, but it dies, so they want to keep it at that level, but they, subhanAllah, fall into addiction and they're ruining themselves. For the believer, that heart, you should know, the only pleasure that heart that will be sustained in it, only by the connection with Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this heart to be in state of need, in state of faqr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah gave us a principle in Aqidah. He said, the believers, they find satisfaction and tranquility in their heart with the dhikr of Allah. And then He said, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. It is not that by the remembrance of Allah that the heart find their assurance and they find their satisfaction, which is mean the heart that you have, the only pleasure to find it, or that is going to give it satisfaction, is the connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's done by two perspectives. The perspective of the worship, al-ibadah, which is the ultimate purpose, And then the perspective, which is the practical perspective, which seeking help and tawakkul, reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in Surah Al-Fatiha, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, the ultimate purpose, وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ is the functional aspect, how to achieve the ibadah. And then when you are in this perspective, then subhanAllah you become a true servant. Then you start to see things that before you didn't see. You start to notice the gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you didn't notice before. You start to see in the Quran things that you never crossed your mind to see it. Why? Because your heart is being kind of cleansed, and that cover is being taken away, and slowly, gradually you are cleansing or removing that cover that is in the heart. Because when we have that cover, what is going to happen? We become like arrogant. And some people, see them very humble, but they are arrogant toward themselves. You know, in the society, they teach you how you say, I can. Yes, I do. Yes, it's me. Yes, you know, I am the best. All of that, subhanAllah, is we are falling into that deep, dark tunnel of the self, which is like corrupting our heart. Therefore, the core of the worship is the humility. So the more you show humility to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more you start to taste the worship, and you bring the quality of the worship, we're going to take you step by step to the love of Allah and to be from the mukhlasin. And then the shaitan, when he see you, wallahi, from a distance, he will run away. Say, this person, he's make me hungry, he's make me starving, he's make me like bored, because the shaitan, they want fun. And for them, the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them khannas, make them shrink, so they cannot stand even to be around you. They cannot stand. And the shaitan, they have messenger, you know, in the form of a human. Sometimes you are in a station or a bus station or a place or a driving, and someone looking at you, and you'll say, why this person looking at me like this? Know that the shaitan, subhanAllah, making one of their shoulder through this person to tempt you, to have you to steal from you a gaze that you are connected to Allah. Wallahi, everything it becomes like a cloudy, like foggy. You don't see it. Why? Because you are connected, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you. And Allah will bring you from a path that will not have you to fall into such things that you might be weak to it. So Allah protecting you. وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَنِعْمَتُهُ وَرَحْمَتُهُ لَاتَّبَعْتُمُ الشَّيْطَانَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. What is the way to do it? What is the way to do it? One of the companions, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he used to serve the Prophet ﷺ, bring him all what he needs, and bring him the water, al-wudu, for the wudu. So the Prophet ﷺ, قال سل حاجتك, ask me anything you want. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I want your companionship in Jannah. It was a beautiful thing. قال أريد مرافقتك في الجنة يا رسول الله. Is there better than this? People, they won't make iftar, you know, with the president paying $10,000. And you have sujood with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the king of the king, you're free. And you start it when you want, and you end it when you want. And that's in the past. I don't know if it's happening now, but for subhanallah, what he told him, قال أعني على نفسك بكثرة السجود. Help me with yourself with much of prostration. I will ask Allah, but you, between my companionship in to be with me in paradise and today is your own nafs. This nafs that we have, filled of evil, always pushing you down, always pulling you back. So how to break this nafs with the humility? How will you break it with the humility? With sujood. Because when you have the sujood, you become a true servant of Allah. I'll finish with this. The best of the servant ever that has been praised by Allah to call abd is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imagine in the biggest conquest that being provided and bestowed upon the Prophet ﷺ is the conquest of Mecca, Fath Mecca. How, subhanAllah, people who had triumph, generals or kings of leader, they enter a city that they just conquered. How? They enter arrogant. They enter with their soldier after they killed everybody. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered, and his head is on the back of his camel making sujood. Sujood. And reading Surah Al-Fath, Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. That was the greatest day. That was the day of a celebration, the angels protecting, escorting, and it was the day to free Mecca from the idolatry. But how the Prophet ﷺ was entering with humility to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we know this, give me just 1 minute, 2 minutes to conclude. If we know this, then Allah established for us the basis, which is the aqidah, the worship. And when you see the basis, you see it in the Surah Isra that we have read. أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل. So you have salat, your sujood. And then you have that moment of Salat al-Fajr when you are listening to the Quran in Salat al-Fajr, or you're reciting on yourself and it being noticed and witnessed by the angels. Is subhanallah, totally different dimension. And then you have subhanallah some of the nights or before Fajr you make those 2 rak'ah in the heart of the night. وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَتَهَجَّدْ بِهِ نَافِلَةً لَكَ. The nafilah that you do, it is not for Allah, it's for you. That may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise you to higher level. Don't you want that? And then, and every project, every plan, everything you do, make the dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught to His Prophet. وَقُلْ رَبِّ أَدْخِلْنِي مُدْخَلَ صِدْقٍ. Everything said, Ya Allah, grant me an entrance of truthfulness, that I will be submitted to you, I will show my humility to you, and Ya Allah, that you will help me to fulfill these objectives according to your way, and an exit of truthfulness. وَاجْعَلْ لِي مِن لَدُنْكَ سُلْطَانًا, and a power, نَصِيرًا, that help me navigate all the challenge in the struggle of this life. فنسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى ونقول ربنا اجعل لنا مدخل صدق وارزقنا مخرج صدق واجعل لنا من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. وإلى الصلاة يرحمكم الله.